It's about 5:30 in the evening. There's a squirrel just in the view of the camera. I wonder if it's going to pop out. And show itself. There's something interesting I can talk about today. I don't really feel like moving around too much because I'm not breathing that well. But nonetheless, there are things that can be talked about. One thing that I was thinking about is the question, does truth matter in a society where at least half the population has the desire to be lied to? In such a situation, questions like, what is truth, don't matter. You aren't forced to define an abstract word like that when half of the population is uninterested in the subject entirely. I find it impossible to believe that Republican voters don't know that they're being lied to. I find it much more plausible to believe that they know they're being lied to when it comes to claims of a stolen election or the evil doings of Democrats. It's much more understandable just to say that those people, those Republican voters, are comfortable with falsehoods. They don't care whether something is true or not. They don't care about a pursuit of knowledge because, in large part, that pursuit of knowledge does not benefit them. That is a frailty of the human mind, to only care about things that benefit you. People should care about all things, whether they serve to benefit or not. One of the things I like about philosophy is its attempt to make distinctions as a squirrel runs up the hill. Its attempt to make distinctions about the world. Now, if you were to talk about the subject of a belief, I believe that you can make the argument that beliefs fall into two categories. There are testable beliefs and non-testable beliefs. The squirrel is right there cutting across. Anyway, a non-testable belief would be something like the text of Scripture. That is, by every metric, untestable. That is why they say in religion you need to go off faith, because they have no way of going off actual testable beliefs. Now, on the other hand, a testable belief would be something that can be observed either directly or indirectly through the senses. In my view, although the many societies of the world operate on both testable and non-testable beliefs, it is my view that testable beliefs should be given more weight than non-testable beliefs. Giving weight to testable beliefs arguably leads to a secular society, whereas giving weight to non-testable beliefs leads to more theocratic societies. One of the things, as the squirrel crosses the other side, one of the things I find interesting to think about is the idea that some people have that philosophy is nearing its end. I disagree with this. I think the aims of philosophy are changing as technology gets better. But I do not think philosophy is nearing its end. They used to say that philosophy was the father of the different branches of interest that humans have, whether science, sociology, psychology, politics, and that once the broad spectrum of each topic matured, philosophy would recede from those areas of interest. I think in modern times, philosophy holds a very important place. But I believe that philosophy will make its greatest contribution to humanity by taking the topics of the future and the topics of today and discussing their implications on humanity. In my view, philosophy is best for the purposes of discussing the implications of ideas. It is not enough to ask broad questions of a subject. In my view, people are better served by taking those broad questions, coming up with possible answers, and then from there discussing the implications of those ideas. To me, as the squirrel rushes back to the other side again, to me, implications to ideas is possibly the most important thing one can think about. If we have a deep understanding of the implications of ideas, we can decide for ourselves which ideas produce the best life for ourselves. I do not care for the different schools of thought that describe the way people come to maximize their life choices, whether they think they're operating from a sense of religious purpose, a sense of duty, or a sense of maximizing goodness, whatever they term goodness to be. I do think, however, that defining the implications of ideas allows everyone to come to their own conclusions about how best to live life. I do not think that there is one category of belief, whether it be religious doctrine, a duty, or utilitarianism. I do not think that any of those sufficiently serves to categorize any real idea of how society should act. I think societies are more individualistic than that. I believe it is up to each person to learn as much as they can about the implications of an idea, and then see how those implications can fit into what they term to be a good life. This squirrel is just going back and forth for no apparent reason. One of the things that is of interest and expands upon the topics of yesterday is the idea that beliefs are temporal in nature. What one person believes today may be completely upended tomorrow. Yesterday, I was talking about the idea of what exists and the different categories of existence. And I made the connection between existing and being aware of existence, and existing and being unaware of the existence of something. In my view, something can exist and we can be totally unaware of that existence. It's just a matter of time before we become aware of that particular entity's existence. You can make the same claim about beliefs. Beliefs come in and out of existence as time passes. The trouble with having a non-testable belief is that, as a plane flies by, is that non-testable beliefs fail this temporal test. Non-testable beliefs tend to be eternal. While testable beliefs can fade in popularity over time as more evidence becomes available on a subject. I believe it is this ability of the testable belief to suffer the fate of time, which gives testable beliefs more weight than non-testable beliefs. It is human nature and the nature of the universe to change over time. So in my view, it only follows that beliefs which also have the possibility to change over time are more true than non-testable beliefs. I do not believe it is fair to completely disregard non-testable beliefs, but one must never give them the same weight as testable beliefs. Beliefs, you can argue, follow a gradient of truth. This gradient of truth changes over time. As a belief matures and more evidence is accrued, that belief becomes closer to truth. The fact that non-testable beliefs do not change over time means that their truth value is also not subject to change. This should be taken into account when believing things like religious doctrine. You should always be suspicious of a belief that does not have a truth value that is susceptible to change over time. Uneducated people like to dismiss science because scientific ideas are in a constant state of improvement. However, if you take the ideas that I've just expressed, you will see that the strength of science is in its ability to constantly improve. Scientific truth values are always changing. And that's a cool shot. The hope is that over time, the truth of a scientific belief increases. It can be argued that a major reason classic Greek philosophers believed in things like idealism over realism is because they had a limited sense for science. They were working with a limited toolkit. However, over time, scientific truth values increased. And as a result, society has all the technology you see around us. And also has a greater ability to appreciate the true complexities of the world. In my view, the idea of idealism, where everything we see around us is a function of our ideas, and that material things don't actually exist, is a lazy man's argument. It's an argument that tries to understand the world from a limited scientific knowledge base. There's a reason realism has taken hold over idealism. And it is in large part because scientific beliefs have increased in their truth value over time. Now, understand this. When I say the term truth value, that is just a term I have essentially made up for the purposes of this discussion. Truth value to me is just the ability to place a probability on a belief being true. If you start out with a belief that you don't necessarily have solid evidence for, as a squirrel runs right up the hill, a claim or belief that you do not have solid evidence for should have a low truth value. Over time, if you obtain more evidence that supports your belief, then the truth value of that belief increases. This is not a scientific scaling, but I believe it is intuitive enough to appreciate and understand. it may be a rehashing of Bayesian philosophy, but I am unsure. Either way, I believe a subjective scaling on the truth of a belief long shot of a squirrel there. I believe placing a subjective scale on the truth of beliefs is a necessary component of talking about the subject of knowledge and truth. As dogs bark in the foreground. I do not believe that you can speak of the truth of a subject without involving some type of gradient to establish how true a belief is. In my view, knowledge is just a collection of belief systems that society believes have a high truth value. I do not believe knowledge is more complicated than that. I do not believe that there is such thing as a universal truth or knowledge which is undisputed. Every truth, every testable truth is subject to improvement. I think the reason religion is so highly regarded among certain populations is because non-testable beliefs are not subject to improvement, meaning they have an air of being seen as in ultimate truth. If you have a belief within unchanging truth value, then that belief may give some people comfort. Maybe the idea that there is a benevolent creator of all things that is going to take care of you and guide you in this life and the next. However, like I said before, such untestable beliefs should not be viewed in such high regard. Which is the exact opposite of what happens in certain societies. It feeds into the idea that religion and untestable beliefs create a world in which relativism thrives. If you operated in a world where only testable beliefs were given weight, there would be less ability for the world to have a morality or in epistemology which was relative. There would be much more consensus about what truth was or is on any given subject. And once you can establish a high truth value to things, you may be able to establish a structure of morality that everyone can agree on. Complexity, societally, is driven by few factors which have huge, long-ranging effects on the world. One of those factors is without question the distinction between testable and non-testable beliefs. That is essentially the core the driver of all the complexity you see around us. I wonder if testable and non-testable beliefs are really just the code that runs potentially the very complex simulation that we may live in. It certainly provides the necessary scope of choice, which produces almost infinite outcomes. In a way, I respect non-testable beliefs more than people who just flat out reject the importance of knowledge. At least the people who subscribe to a non-testable belief are engaging in some attempt to understand the world around us. Whereas people that just enjoy being lied to go back to the initial point I was making in the video, people who just enjoy being lied to have no claim they can possibly make arguing that they're in search of any semblance of truth. That's an interesting color to the sky. It'll be interesting to see how much cutaway time in the middle of ideas the squirrels got. But they were making some interesting movements that I wanted to capture, and hopefully they don't really break up the flow of the video too much. To me, ontology is probably the most critical aspect of philosophy, because it is the framework on which everything else is born. To understand something, we must break it down into its component parts and understand how those parts relate. That is where understanding begins. These philosophy videos are kind of fun, and there's something different. So they're interesting to me, at least. As a bird sits in the tree and it just signals to its friends. The only thing visible through the camera at this point is the interestingly colored sky. I cannot see the moon today. I think that's going to be the end of the video. As you get some final views of the sun making its way to the other side of the world.